I'm going to tell you guys something that nobody's told you before, but self-improvement is ruining your life bit by bit. This is how it's doing it. For people who don't watch this kind of content, self-improvement has been one of those subjects that's kind of a cliche. You're watching people talk about motivating you. You don't necessarily know what results those people have in that video. You could be watching this and thinking the same about myself. And constantly what happens is when you start to watch self-improvement content, you get in this loop where you eventually begin to binge watch the content. At first, the intentions are pure. You're watching the content simply because it's giving you hope. It's convincing you of a reality where there's a better version of yourself, whatever that looks like for you. And you think to yourself that one day, if I continue on this journey or I replicate the actions being told in this video, whether that's the habits, the mindset tricks, the morning routines this person's doing, that my life is going to eventually skyrocket and I'm going to get all the things that I desire for. I first got into self-improvement at 16 years old. When I first got into it, the main thing that I was getting into was the dating content. I wanted to watch content that basically spoke about things that I was interested in at the time, which ironically was women at the time. Everyone was doing these videos. This was the time when Vine was very popular. If you remember Vine, it was sort of like TikTok back in the days, but mainly for like pranks and things like that, whilst we got a diverse sense of content on TikTok these days. When I used to watch this content, I used to watch guys that would just go up to girls and start speaking to them for the first time. And I remember watching that content and it sort of warped my perception of the world. Prior to that moment of me watching that kind of content, my sort of barriers of entries to speak to women is essentially I thought the only way you can do it is if you're in the same school, college, university, same work environment, or you happen to meet them in a club. But there was never a reality in my head where I thought that I could actually just go up to a girl and get her number. So eventually I dived into the self-improvement content. Eventually you get into a rabbit hole where you start to watch other things like mindset, fitness, self-improvement in the sense of meditation, the spiritual aspects, and I became obsessed. And I found myself what you might find yourself where I'm just binge watching content after content. I'm constantly looking for this landmine of gold that's going to change my life. This bright idea that is something different to what I've already heard 1,000 times, and that's going to change my life. And as the years went by, a lot of the information I was getting, some of it I would implement, but a lot of it was just information that was stored in my head. So I had the knowledge, but I didn't necessarily have the results to replicate what I actually knew. So a lot of the advice I would give to friends, family members, people who were in situations where they couldn't quite figure out what to do, I had the right advice because that's all I did. I would binge watch self-improvement content. Most of you guys watching this, you probably know you need to meditate. You probably know that you need to go to the gym consistently. You need to be disciplined. But what is that information to you? It's just noise. And matter of fact, self-improvement for the most part is usually ruining your life. And the reason is there's one enemy which self-improvement creates, which is potentially going to ruin your life unless you get a grips on it. You know, it's funny, when I was in school, one of the things that the girls used to say to us when we was younger is the first thing they look at a man in order to determine his value, to determine whether they should go on a date with him, is his trainers. What's he wearing on his feet? And that is basically a reflection of who he is. So a lot of the times in schools as guys, we were very much competitive in everything we did, whether that was studying, whether that was sports, whether that was in fashion sense, what we were wearing, what sort of trends were we into, etc. What content were we watching, what TV shows, etc. What ended up happening is, yes, we were able to compete with other people. I think competition is healthy when it's done in a healthy way. If you're somebody who sees somebody in better shape than you and you think to yourself, I want a physique that's similar, then it doesn't hurt to basically look at that person as inspiration for you to get into the gym and get your act together. But what it does is it creates comparisons. And what we've got to understand in this world is when everybody's comparing everyone to each other, what ends up happening is everyone seems to be following the crowd in order to determine what's the best thing to do. Right now, content online, a lot of the sort of things people are talking about is avoiding lust, looks maxing, optimizing on one particular metric that's going to help you change your life. But all of these comparisons means that every single guy that I see in the space is pretty much copying each other. Nobody sounds unique, nobody has their own outlook, and nobody seems to know exactly what is the right answer. Everybody's preaching one thing or focusing on one metric, and I get it from an algorithm point of view. If you've got one particular subject that you cover, you can pretty much dominate that niche. Let me ask you guys something. Have you ever seen somebody in the workplace? Let's say you go to a job and you see somebody and they're really good at one particular area of that workplace. Let's say me, I work in sales. But when I was really, really good at sales, I was always failing to climb up the career ladder in my particular profession. And that's because I never had big picture thinking. See, when you're the top seller, what typically happens is you're making the most money on the floor, because a lot of the times the top sales guy, because of commission structures and sales, you end up being the best performer. You can make even more than your manager if the structure of your company is set up in a way where that opportunity is there. And because you're optimizing for money, most of the times, that's why we go to work, we're working for money. You focus on the money, but you don't necessarily have a direction in which your life is moving. And it's very easy for you to get stuck in that same sales role without looking at the larger picture. How do you come across to your other colleagues? Are you able to communicate in a way that people find you friendly? Do you appear friendly? Do you speak to the managers? Are you showing interest in the company's development plan? These are the things that are going to help you develop your character overall, not just the one metric of optimizing for as much money as possible. And this is like self-improvement. Whenever you watch the content, you see things like looks maxing, no fap, whatever it is. And people are basically heavily focused on this one metric, thinking that this is going to change their life. For a long time, I did the same. And what happened is I was caught up in this loop where I was always making comparisons. See, when I got to a certain weight of, I started off at 61 kg. I wanted to get to 72. I did that. But then when I got there, I wanted to climb up higher because I was always comparing myself to the fitness influencers on Instagram, forgetting that social media a lot of the time is a facade. And this is what watching constant self-improvement content can do for you. You constantly find yourself comparing yourselves to people where you don't really have a larger picture of what their life looks like. On top of that, you don't necessarily know if the things they're teaching is relevant to your particular life. One of the answers that you can find in order for you to actually figure out what sort of direction you should be optimizing for, what sort of habits you should be prioritizing is, first of all, you need to sit back and, believe it or not, you're not going to believe me when I say this, you need to do nothing. I've never really been a fan of meditation heavily when I was younger. Out of all the self-improvement content, I never really saw how sitting down and just breathing for 5 to 10 minutes was really going to change my life. But funny enough, the thing that I was avoiding was the one thing that I needed to do the most. Not necessarily meditation itself, the breathing or whatever, but essentially I needed to just silence my mind and figure out what direction I wanted to move my life in. See, when you're watching content all the time, what you're doing is, a lot of the times, some people are applying the content that they're watching into their life so that they can actually improve their life. But a lot of us are just consuming. We're becoming consumers, passive consumers, and we're actually treating self-improvement similar to how we treat a TV series on Netflix, waiting for the next episode to come out of whatever content creator you like, absorbing information about business which is not applicable to you in this very moment in time, not taking the action needed, seeking out different books but not actually extracting the lessons and finding out how it applies to you. See, in order for you to figure out the direction that you're moving in this world, you need to first of all sit down and you need to ask yourself, what direction are you trying to move into? This takes time. Now, a lot of people will make the argument, I'm too busy in my life to just sit down and plan where I actually want to go. You see this all the time where people speak about planning your goals. And I think it can become a bit of a cliche because everyone has the same routines. Probably you watching this, you might be waiting for me to tell you, you need to get a journal and you need to put out your 3 to 6 months goals. That is very effective, don't get me wrong. But a lot of the times for you to start, you just need to have some sort of direction to move in. I used to want to be a rapper. That was the thing that I really wanted to do when I was younger. And one of the reasons I love music is because it gives you creative freedom, financial freedom, and it was the only lane that I saw where I could be myself in a creative way that allowed people to also watch me and basically buy my music, and I could provide for my family, etc. And eventually I started to fall out of love with the idea of making music, simply because music is one of those things that you need large investments to get into. You might be looking at a self-improvement path. Maybe you're looking into things like crypto, starting a business, brick and mortar, where you want a physical store, or maybe you want a digital business that's online. And you've consumed all the information and you've probably played the scenario in your head of what you need to do in order to get that done. But the problem is, when you do it like that, you find yourself stuck in a situation where you don't move forward. You're watching the next video, you know exactly what to do, but you're not actually taking action. A lot of the times, you know what to do inherently. A lot of the information that you've been consuming for self-improvement up until this point is in your self-conscious. You already know the answers. You know exactly what you need to do. You're just not taking the action. You're not sitting down asking yourself, okay, what do I actually want to do? And what's the thing that I can do at this very moment that can begin to move me down that path that's going to help me achieve the dreams that I have in mind. When I finally sat down after 30 odd years of trying different hustles, high ticket sales, TikTok shop, affiliations, crypto, starting a physical business, hosting events, I was a club promoter, I'll save that subject for another video. I eventually looked at the things that I liked about music, the creative freedom, the things I was mentioning earlier. And when I got down to the bottom of that, the nitty gritty, that's when I realized the best route that I can take is building a personal brand, because more time I have all the information. What I need to do is start doing the implementation. That's why I make these videos. And at first I thought to myself, well, what value am I going to give these guys? I don't own a multi-million-pound business yet. Manifestation. But I knew for a fact that all the experiences that I had in my life could be of value to somebody else. I wanted to save somebody else time that was further down the road like me. When I was young, I optimized for one metric. When it was dating, it was dating. When it was me trying to start my event hosting company, it was that, just doing events all the time, focused on that, nothing else. I never realized that although balance is usually going to be weakened when you're in a period of extreme focus on one particular metric, you do need to have an overall picture of what you're going for. When I'm building self-improvement, what I'm doing now is essentially I'm building the person that I want to become. The person I want to become is the sort of person that isn't shy to get on camera, communicate his message, and be congruent throughout the course of whatever period of time I'm speaking for. 10, 15, 20, 1 hour, whatever it is. The person I want to become is somebody that's in shape. It doesn't have to be the most jacked up person. You probably see that. There's probably people with better physiques than me. Probably, definitely. But that's not what I'm optimizing for. I'm no longer going down one particular lane. When you're watching self-improvement, unfortunately for you guys, the more self-improvement content you watch, the more stuck in your head you become. What I would recommend for you to actually do in a practical sense, which is probably what you've been waiting for me to say, is I want you to go back to your childhood days. What were your interests? What were the subjects you specialized in when you was in school? For me, it was creative writing, storytelling in English. I really enjoyed that. Media was a big subject of mine in my secondary school / high school days. I was studying the way in which marketing happens in magazines, music videos, television shows, advertisements, why the audience is so engaged by it. What's the mechanics behind it? That was always interesting to me. Later on in my life, I started reading books like Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene, understanding human psychology. That was always an interest in me. And when I started to look at absolutely everything, I realized that everything can be offered in the route that I'm working on now. Personal development, building a personal brand, my name, that's based off of me, my interests, my background. I'm never going to be the old guy with gray hair, sit here giving you financial advice in a suit, which I call the performative type of self-improvement. I'm going to be genuinely me. And this is what you guys need to do. I speak about the person that you want to become over the particular habit or metric you need to master right now. Leave a comment on what you guys believe is the current route that you're on. Do you have a direction that you've picked? If so, what's that direction and what does it look like? Have you actually figured out what your interests are, your habits currently, and what the habits you want to build are? Once you figure out where you want to go, it's very easy to align every single part of you to that particular goal. I'll give you an example. If my goal is to become financially successful, then I understand when it comes to building a personal brand, I'm going to have to become good at filming content, editing content, putting out content. I have to master things like thumbnails, getting views, monetizing, other things like that. But also, if I want a personal brand, let's be completely honest, appearance plays a part to it. I'm going to have my own appearance. Staying in shape is one thing that I can do to demonstrate my discipline without telling you physically to the camera. When I'm working on my communication, when you see me speaking the way I'm speaking, this is years and years and years of working in sales roles. I have over a decade in sales. I've been working in sales since I was 18. I'm 31. These are the things I looked at, and this is the way in which I decided what route to take. Your route might not be the same as mine, but there is a route that you want to take which is definitely shaped towards you. Rather than jump into the next video and hearing that crypto is the best thing to jump on, why don't you figure out first what direction you're moving in?